Why couldn't Jesus communicate his will to all who believed in him? Do I deserve to be locked into childless slavery for the color of my skin or not? Why couldn't God give us the right answer and communicate it to his followers? Surely God would have some opinion on the issue, something to say. But instead, history is full of Christians slaughtering other Christians, each mutually convinced of incompatible propositions, yet totally confident of themselves as they kill each other over completely incompatible moral assertions. But for my parents, the mystery was easily resolved for questions like this. If the screen will cooperate. It was Satan, of course. The Prince of Darkness is a very busy fallen angel. Not only is he deceiving adherents from all the religions you disagree with, all of them, he's deceiving them all. I was taught in no uncertain terms that our entire society is, of course, manipulated by Satan, eager to destroy the world. Now here it gets confusing, because at various times and during various sermons, both God and Satan seem committed to the complete annihilation of the United States and all it represents. At other times, God is barely restraining Satan from destroying the United States, followed by the rest of the world. He has to destroy America first, then the world. And it's really hard to keep track of, really. And it's a wonder the country has lasted so long with these supernatural beings so determined to destroy us in various sermons. But evolution had always been Satan's weapon against America's youth, and one means by which to manipulate the country. But Satan also has the power to control our politicians. This was strictly maintained. But as my skepticism grew, the pattern became obvious. Satan is sort of a tool, an excuse, which, well, not just my parents, but many other people in our church, they use Satan to explain why every public figure disagrees with him. Every public figure who disagrees with my parents or other church officials, somehow they're all on the devil's payroll, and of course, the entire Washington political establishment, all of them. I am not exaggerating. I'm not making this up. Not only was I taught this as a child, they still want me to believe this now. If I go home, they still try to persuade me of this even now. But it was never clear whether politicians become Satan-possessed upon reaching Washington, or whether only those enthralled to the Dark Lord are able to reach elite positions. It's never really terribly clear. Again, while I am not exaggerating the situation, it is important to note that my home life wasn't bad, and my parents, they didn't try to deny me vaccines or beat the devil out of me, though some in our church did. That was scary. But their perception of the world is shaped by these superstitions. But these beliefs can only survive in the absence of any rational scrutiny. So I began to wonder, since Satan is driven to destroy the American family because we're God's country, even though God sometimes wants to destroy us, and Satan controls all politicians, why doesn't Satan use his control to start an unwinnable nuclear war that would destroy the American family over the course of a few days? Because God won't let him, becomes the inevitable answer. But Satan controls everyone in Washington, and this is persistently maintained. Why can't he get them to obey his will? But of course they do obey his will, and Satan wants to destroy us all. So somehow all the movers and shakers, they're all being controlled by Satan, but somehow God is holding Satan back until the Antichrist is ready with his European army to fulfill a prophecy in Daniel and Revelations and bring about the abomination of desolations, but not until the Jews finish their new temple, which requires the birth of a prophetic red heifer. I'm not exaggerating or making this up. Trying to work it all out, frankly, makes my head hurt. But arguments over these claims involve the invention of superstition upon superstition without a shred of evidence. And if you try to pin it down, then people in my church or my parents, they'll just invent more and more superstitions and just pile it on. And so I began to wonder, how is this any different from any of the other religious beliefs I was taught to reject? During the time I was having these doubts, college was over and I bounced around various teaching jobs in a deistic malaise. I wound up in St. Joe, intending to go back to school. I found a little bit of work as a freelance science and technical writer. I did a little bit of temporary lab work. And partially as a result of doing freelance science writing, I had incentive and opportunity to continue to research science and similar historical issues myself. And I continued essentially to study myself out of my childhood belief system. My brain is always trying to solve problems and reach new insights, one of which came to me about 2 years ago when everything just started to click. All the questions I wrestle with about God would make perfect sense if God were a projection of human psychology, real in the sense that fashion or fine arts are real, but with no more power than our imagination grants. I just kept getting more and more curious, and it just became too important to figure out what all the evidence really was. I tried to gather all the evidence I could and not settle for any traditional religious excuses anymore. So searching for the knowledge I'd been conditioned to fear as a teenager, it soon became easy to dismantle every Sabbath school creationist lesson I remember. It actually became much easier than I thought, and all the subsequent creationist publications that my parents encouraged me to read. I guess if there could be one fact that would be the most important, I learned a few years ago that, well, if anyone has taken a biology class, they've probably talked about vestigial organs. We not only have vestigial organs, we have vestigial genes. Everybody who's a mammal, and I hope all of you are mammals, we all have a broken gene, actually 3 broken genes inside us to make egg yolk. Egg yolk for laying eggs, just like chickens do. We know what the gene does because you see chickens, and chickens lay eggs with yolk in them. It turns out all of us have broken genes inside of us to do the same thing. And so why would a designer create something like that? Why would he put that in us? And it looks like this change happened 70 million years ago. We also have a broken gene to make a gorilla's jaw muscle, which looks like it was deactivated 2 million years ago. Why would some God, who God doesn't want us to believe in evolution, right? He's up there, apparently. He's up there, and he's just angrily waiting to smite people who believe in evolution. But somehow scientists can find fossil genes inside of us. But God doesn't want us to believe in evolution. And that raises a number of bizarre philosophical issues. In 1857, a theologian and amateur naturalist named Philip Henry Goss, he published a book called Omphalos. And, you know, if you can absorb the facts of biology and geology and fossil genes and somehow still convince yourself that you were handcrafted in Jesus' heavenly workshop, then you and he are in good company. Goss believed that all of the mountains, all the rock layers, all the fossils that you can find in the earth, he believed that all of them were illusions planted by God to make the world look mature. And even back in his day, the idea was unpopular. It kind of makes God a liar. So if God hates evolution, does not want me to believe in it, how could God set up all this evidence and then blame us for taking the evidence as it stands? And it makes God into a liar or trickster. I mean, if you try to maintain some kind of creationism, and if you read even a little of that, even a little bit of modern research, then it makes God into a liar, frankly. And that was actually one of the criticisms of Goss, that a God who creates false rock layers and false fossils is a liar. And it just compounds the absurdity even more. But there are a lot of people who will affirm that Darwinism does not necessarily lead to atheism. But for me, the silence of God and the problem of evil, combined with this new forbidden knowledge, because biology is evil, it's a conspiracy, and I could find myself agreeing with Friedrich Nietzsche's madman in the marketplace. Where is God? We have killed him, you and I. Although I feel saner and more at peace than ever. But by this time, the stakes had changed. It was all well and good to whisper the word atheist in my apartment, but my brother has a bunch of kids now, and I cringe when my parents try to fill their heads with this biblical literalism. And I know some people in this group don't like to directly criticize other religions, but this conservative creationist Christianity, I will call it nonsense. This hyper-conservative biblical literalism. So last Thanksgiving, I was trying to expose my nieces and nephew to a wider world, and there's actually kind of a weird story behind that. I suggested they watch a nature documentary to give them a better appreciation for the nature that's really out there. And there were a lot of predators and some poisonous animals in the documentary. I thought it was very exciting. And the girls watched it with interest. So my oldest niece, Alexis, she just had to ask a question after the documentary was over. Why did God make all those animals with all that poison? Someone could get hurt. Reasonable question. I was kind of hoping she would start thinking along those lines. So, of course, her grandfather, my father, he had a ready answer. It's because of Adam and Eve eating the wrong apple. And I wanted to groan out loud, but they're not my kids, you know. Of course, that reminded me of a few articles I've been reading recently where an interesting comparison came to mind. This Tyrannosaurus, her name is Sue, by the way. What do a Tyrannosaurus named Sue and Queen Hatshepsut of ancient Egypt have in common? Actually, it appears they may have died of the same disease. Taken together, both of them teach an important lesson. Sue, the Tyrannosaurus, was found to contain holes in her jaw, smooth holes in her jaw, that are consistent with an infection from an abscessed tooth. And it would have caused horrible pain, and they didn't have dental care back then. So no matter how powerful you were, if she wasn't able to bite and swallow, no matter how strong and powerful she was, then she was doomed, and it probably was not a very pleasant death either. What does that have in common? What does she have in common with Queen Hatshepsut of Egypt? It was theorized by an interdisciplinary team of scientists and archaeologists who identified the mummy of Queen Hatshepsut that they may actually have died of the same disease. It may have been a similar ailment. There was evidence that she died from an infected abscessed tooth that went systemic. It might not have been the same organism, but it apparently was the same disease that killed both of them. And that just got me thinking. One more reminder that even the most powerful organisms, whether tyrant lizard or human monarch, are vulnerable to the same diseases, disappointments, pains, and privations that have afflicted all animal life from long before the existence of humanity. One more lesson underscoring the monumental anthropocentric absurdity of claiming that any human transgression somehow could explain the whole of nature. But my parents have become aware of my apostasy for some time, and right now they're still praying for me, right now. But sometimes Dad challenges me. So earlier this year, I'm visiting them, and we're all finishing up breakfast in the kitchen. We were watching the bird feeders. Mom set up in the backyard through the window, and it's a relaxing morning. And I'm surreptitiously reading Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion on my Kindle. I didn't mention that to them. You can read whatever you want on an e-reader, and nobody has to know about it. And in the backyard flies a woodpecker to get some seeds from the suet feeder. So Dad wants to challenge me. See, he didn't know what I was reading, but he wanted to reinforce the third pillar of our church, misunderstanding evolution. So Dad seizes on the opportunity. The woodpecker, long being a cherished bird in creationist circles. Dave, you know that woodpeckers couldn't evolve because the in-between stages wouldn't be able to survive without God's help. You know, maybe I should have taken the bait. I didn't want to get into a huge argument with my father, and I realized that Dad doesn't really want to know how the woodpecker evolved. I could explain it, but he doesn't really want to know. Dad and most Christians, they don't really want to know how woodpeckers evolved. It would be beside the point. Believing in the unevolvability of the woodpecker, and by extension, whales, lichen, migratory birds, and humans, they have become central to the identity of many Christians, including the ones in my church and my family. We got to the point where such an attempt would be the same as arguing a Catholic out of transubstantiation.